Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kimberly Guilfoyle Show, live on Rumble, where facts come first and where news is done right. And we begin with big breaking news out of New York, where President Trump won a huge victory today when a New York appeals court threw out the more than $500 million fine he owed in Attorney General Letitia James's baseless business fraud case. The 323-page decision included 3 separate opinions, but which all agreed the fine against the president, which had grown to $515 million, including interest, was excessive. In response, President Trump posted, quote, "Total victory in the fake New York State Attorney General Letitia James case. I greatly respect the fact that the court had the courage to throw out this unlawful and disgraceful decision that was hurting business all throughout New York State." Meanwhile, the New York AG has mounting problems of her own as she faces an investigation for allegedly lying on a mortgage application to get a lower interest rate. And that is not all happening on the financial front, as the Trump administration is taking even more steps to restore integrity to our legal and banking institutions by making it clear that if institutions debank or punish customers for their political views, there will be consequences. Watch.
Regulators now for several years have said, if a client gives you reputational risk, we're going to scrutinize you. Now, the question is, what does reputational risk mean? Well, it turns out it means whatever you want it to mean. And if you're Obama or Biden, it could mean conservative causes you don't like. So flip over to the next screen. And now you've got these bank regulators or these banking executives, okay, anonymously. And what they're saying is, look at the word here. Ambiguity, okay? So a regulator says, oh, you're in the firearms business, you're in payday lending, you're a conservative Christian. That creates a reputational risk for you, so we're going to come down on you for that. The bank says, I don't want regulators on me, so I'm not going to bank that person.
And in our nation's capital, crime is hitting new lows after President Trump's bold efforts to crack down on violent crime. Watch this.
The ground in Washington last week, that city's crime fight went into overdrive. And now we're seeing the impact and the dramatic reductions in crime.
When the National Guard rolled into Washington last week, the locals seemed skeptical.
The crime is minimal here. There's not really a lot of crime here. It looks like window dressing to me.
But with the Guard on the ground, crime is on the decline. For the first time in a long time, D.C. has gone 7 days without a homicide. And that's not all. Carjackings are down 83%. Robberies are down 46%. Car thefts down 21%. And overall violent crime is down 22%.
When you have these kind of numbers going down, it basically says this is a success, and that means people feel safer.
Like many big cities, Washington's police department is critically short-staffed.
People who don't feel safe aren't free.
Sergeant Betsy Smith with the National Police Association says it is ripe for federal help.
More police generally equals less crime.
Stop there, because inside the swamp, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard is rooting out the rot one security clearance at a time. Take a look.
The Office of the Director of National Intelligence, as you know, was created almost 20 years ago in the wake of the horrific intelligence failures that surrounded the Islamist terrorist attack on 9/11 here in our country. So the ODNI was created with a very simple purpose, a very simple but critical mission, which was to ensure that intelligence from across the intelligence community was actually being integrated, that people were talking to each other and sharing intelligence, not leaving it in silos, and to exercise oversight to make sure that the intelligence being provided to the President of the United States, to Congress, to different policymakers was timely, relevant, and apolitical. Unbiased and objective intelligence to best inform some of the most critical decisions that the leaders in our country make, foremost among them the President of the United States and Commander-in-Chief. 20 years later, here we sit now where ODNI has more than doubled in size, bloated with bureaucracy, inefficiencies and redundancies, wasting taxpayer dollars, but actually getting in the way of the mission that it was charged to do. As you mentioned, it's become rife with politicization and weaponization of intelligence, some of which we've revealed and released over the last few weeks that has occurred under previous directors and previous administrations. And so rooting out those deep state actors who are violating the oath that every intelligence professional swears to the Constitution of the United States and ultimately undermining this core national security mission that those at ODNI are charged with, that the intelligence community is charged with. So today's announcement is the first step to aggressively get after our core national security mission, root out those deep state actors, and really focus on delivering what the American people deserve.
It's clearly a new day in Washington, D.C., and the wins, well, they just keep on coming in. Joining me now, managing editor at the Daily Wire, Tim Rice. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So there's a lot to get into. Let's be honest. It's pretty exciting. I love news. First off, the New York Appeals Court, a huge win for President Trump, tossing out the $500+ million witch hunt against the president. Obviously, he sees it this way, and I think it's a fair assessment. It's just another validation of the, major holes in this case that existed from the start. How do you think it plays out politically? What does it mean for the New York AG's office?
I mean, I think politically it's a huge win for the president in two reasons. The first is the obvious one, which is that it's yet another a case against him that he's been saying is baseless from the beginning, that his allies have been saying is baseless from the beginning, which now a court has ruled is baseless, right? So it substantiates the president's defense of himself and what the president's allies have been saying. But the second part is that it really does sort of lay bare the fact that this was a political attack against the president, right? These cases that are falling left and right now, they're not the political cases, right? They're not about things that the president did while in office. They are cases that partisan political actors like Tish James brought against the president, drawing on years-old complaints, things that they dredged up and inflated during his time in office and between his time in office in an effort to prevent him from returning to office, right? So of course, the biggest win that the president had on that front was getting reelected in 2024. But now this just continues to bolster it. And to your second question about what does this mean for the New York AG's office, it's just another bad headline for Tish James, right? I mean, she is an unserious figure who, though, people that have had her number from the beginning have known that she's an unserious figure from the beginning, which of course is nothing new in New York Democratic politics. But she's one of these people who was given cover over the past 8 years because no matter how much of a partisan hack or a shady figure or an incompetent elected official you were, if you were in a majority Democrat district or state and you attacked President Trump, that was enough for the voters. That was enough for the media. But that's not the case anymore. And so, things are falling down around Tish James, and I hope this isn't the last thing.
Yeah, very rapidly. And of course, Letitia James, brought this case. Let's just tell the facts like they are. In the middle of a presidential election, I think in an effort blatantly to try and interfere with the campaign cycle. She never had any legitimate basis, I say this based on my opinion as a former prosecutor, to actually bring the case. She now has her own, how the tables have turned, mortgage fraud investigation. It seems to be just another example of, this kind of lawfare backfiring.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the mortgage thing is just absolutely fantastic, right? Because with so many of these cases, and it's the same with Jim Comey. It's the same with all of these folks, right? It's the fact that the things that they're doing are so clearly extra legal or maybe even illegal. Their defense of themselves is grounded so often in the fact that I am the law, I am justice, right? It's like Dr. Fauci saying I am science, right? So we Americans are just supposed to roll over and accept what the Jim Comeys and the Letitia Jameses of the world say, not because they're showing us the case law, not because they're showing us the constitutional precedent, but because they are the white hats fighting for truth, justice, in the American way, and Donald Trump is this big evil bully who is in the White House doing wrong. And millions of people believe this, right? The media seem to believe this. Democrat voters seem to believe this. Oh, well, she's putting herself out there. She's going against the president. And of course, that's obviously been nonsense from the beginning. President Trump doesn't jail his political opponents. It's his political opponents who are trying to jail him. But But again, it's just so much more delicious. The fact that in the midst of all this, we also realize that she's being accused of doing something illegal.
That's unbelievable. I mean, honestly, just think about us covering all of this, and now look at it's come full circle. And speaking of, lawfare, major bank executives are now saying that they were under pressure by the Obama and Biden administration to deny services to individuals and businesses for political reasons. I know about this very personally, because it happened to me, it happened to Don Jr. It was ridiculous. They've been trying to get a mortgage loan, anything like that, or open bank accounts. Insane. It is another form of lawfare. What damage has been done? It's all coming to light now. And how can it be remedied?
I think some of the biggest damage has been done, right, wrong, or indifferent, is going to be to the financial institutions themselves. I do have a degree of sympathy for the big banks, as much as one can sympathize with big banks. But, I do believe them, right? I don't think this is a cop-out. I think that certainly under the Obama administration, when this all began, when it was the Obama people trying to get gun manufacturers and NRA members, sort of sideline them and siphon off their resources, I do think that they put immense pressure on the financial institutions. But the fact of the matter is, these are the shadiest of the shady institutions in the deep state. Even it's taken, right? This was a big scandal, but it wasn't really a scandal outside conservative media in 2014 when it started. So it's taken basically a decade for this scandal to come to light. And even now that it's come to light, it's still kind of impossible to understand. These banking regulators are still sort of agencies that don't make sense. But what does make sense is banks, right? No one knows these subcommittees of the unelected commissions. People know JP Morgan Chase.
Right.
People know Bank of America. People know Wells Fargo. So I think that the biggest reputational damage, again, is going to be to, I think Americans are going to, the banks are going to be the ones that have to undo it. Obviously, the Trump administration has done its part to roll back the process and restore some faith in these agencies. But again, there never would be faith in these agencies, even if they were doing something right, because no one really knows what this is. I think now the onus is on the financial institutions themselves to earn Americans' trust back.
No, I think you're right. They're in a position now where let's see what their next steps are, and they need to earn the trust of the American people back. I mean, the discrimination that I saw and witnessed and experienced, it was just, it was next level for people with great credit and jobs and working hard. And they go, we don't care. Like, we're not going to give you anything. You can't even open an account. Like, it's bananas. I also know, because you guys do phenomenal reporting at the Daily Wire, that you guys reported on some major FTC news today regarding big tech and privacy. What can you tell us?
Yeah, so we had a great exclusive this morning from our White House correspondent, Mary Margaret Olahan, and it was that FTC chairman, Andy Ferguson, and the agency sent a letter to pretty much every major big tech company, Meta, Google, Snapchat, all these, Apple, all of the companies, essentially saying that in light of all these developments that we're seeing in the European Union, the Online Services Act in the United Kingdom that allows companies to go in and use these back doors, to search iPhones or computers, this EU legislation that is pushing similar sort of to give government access to people's personal devices in order to investigate material that they think is inappropriate, which is kind of a unwieldy definition of what constitutes inappropriate, or to censor content. And so what Chairman Ferguson in the FTC's letter essentially said was, you are American companies, and American law is what matters here. And it doesn't matter what's going on in the United Kingdom, and it doesn't matter what goes on in the European Union, but you are expected to protect Americans' privacy and Americans' freedom of speech first and foremost. And of course, this comes on the tail end of Vice President J.D. Vance spearheading, as we reported earlier this week, the effort to stop Apple from granting this sort of backdoor access, as they call it, to devices in the United Kingdom. So this is something that the Trump administration has really gotten out on the forefront of, pushing these big tech companies to really do what's right. And it's this murky area of global and international law, but the Trump administration is really getting out front of these issues and saying, we're not even going to let you get to the point where you make the argument. We're not even going to let you get to the point of saying, oh, well, this is what we needed to do to operate in the European Union. Oh, this is what we needed to do to please international regulators. It's not even getting to that point. They're saying you will defend Americans' rights to privacy and free speech, or there will be consequences.
Yeah, I like this. And in your coverage of big tech, how has the industry sentiment shifted, in your opinion, since January 20th? Is it still mostly hostile to the administration, or is that tide really starting to turn?
I think the tide has started to turn, and I think you see that. I mean, big tech certainly, but corporate America, even in the media to a certain extent, I think, I think the tide has turned across the board. It's really a matter of which industries are changing their tide, right? Or are changing their tune in response to the tide changing. And I think, right, the clearest example of the fact that big tech has sort of woken up and realized what time it is that there hasn't been any backlash to any of this, right? The vice president was successful in negotiating keeping the security backdoor closed with Apple devices. We haven't heard. Imagine if this had happened, during the first Trump administration or during the Biden administration, if someone had called for these sorts of protections, there would have been, we'd already see the commercials would already be rolling about how, we at Meta aren't just an American company, we're a global company, and
Right.
we're not just Americans, we're global citizens and whatnot. But no, that's not happening. These companies do realize that that things have changed and that they no longer have the protection of a Democratic administration that is in many cases more sympathetic to these overreaching European bureaucrats than they are to the American citizens who elected them and who they're supposed to represent.
Yeah, you're right about that. Spot on. And as we look abroad, we see President Trump doing everything he can. I mean, this is a president who favors and strongly works very hard to achieve peace and end wars. He's trying to do that and move Russia and Ukraine closer to a peace deal. How do you see the situation? What's the latest there?
I mean, the president loves to describe certain meetings as perfect meetings, right? I had a perfect phone call. I had a perfect meeting. I think this week's meeting with Zelensky and with European leaders was about as close to a perfect meeting as you could get. We had the nastiness of February was put behind us. But with everybody sort of on board, right? President Trump was good-natured about it. President Zelensky was good-natured about it. The European Union leaders were all sort of in line. They understood, what was being asked of them. They sort of happily sat to the side at first. I think that was the thing that struck me the most about this week's meeting, right? Is that for so long this Ukraine situation has been so bungled with all these various interests, right? And, to say nothing of it's gone beyond Russia and Ukraine, and the United States as an intermediary. Zelensky comes to the United States, and it's not just him meeting with the president, it's him meeting with, Democrat congressional leaders and all of these people, and then the Europeans are involved. And, at the end of the day, right, I think what's happened is the President Zelensky realized that his best hope is for President Trump to play a role that so many of his predecessors have played in the 20th and 21st centuries and serve as a moderator, and for the United States to serve as a moderator between him and a warring hostile power. So what we finally saw this week was we finally had an instance where the president sat down with Zelensky without meddling European leaders, without NATO up his back, without Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries hopping in and talking about all the reasons they think that we should send more money to Ukraine. And already look what happened. We've already had Putin and Zelensky have agreed to sit down. Maybe the president's going to join them. Maybe he's not. That's something those three leaders can decide down the line. But I think that, it was an important and necessary first step towards finally bringing this conflict to an end.
I agree, and I think you just you told it like it is, and that is the situation. And who wouldn't want to applaud that and be happy about it? I mean, who wants to sit there and say send more money to kill more people? Like, what are we doing here? Peace should be the objective.
There was a survey, I believe we reported on it. There was a survey just out, this public opinion poll of Ukrainians. And, it was something like 3/4 of Ukrainians, I'm getting the number wrong, but a majority of Ukrainians said, we just want to see this war end, at whatever, by any means necessary. So, I mean, most Americans want to see this war end. Most Ukrainians want to see this war end. We don't have fair public opinion polling coming out of Russia, but I would imagine all the Russians whose sons and daughters have all been sent to die in this war want this to end. The only people who don't want this war to end, quite frankly, are Vladimir Putin and the Congressional Democrats, who for some reason have decided that a perpetual war in Ukraine is the thing that they are most in favor of.
Yeah, hanging their hat on. And meanwhile, let's talk about Congress. So September 2nd, everybody's supposed to get back to work. And the Senate too. What will be the top agenda items to keep our eyes on?
Well, I think that the biggest thing that we're going to have to look for is what this Senate decides to be when it comes back from recess, right? We ended on sort of a a shocking and kind of grumbling compromise, with Senate Democrats eventually acquiescing a little bit and the one big beautiful bill passing. So I think broadly speaking, we need to see, what's going to happen. Is this going to be when every Senate Democrat decides to launch their midterm campaign or their presidential campaign in many cases? I think another thing that I'm personally keeping an eye on is this redistricting fight, which we've seen in Texas, we've seen in California. This is something that's been percolating at the state level throughout recess. I will be interested to see if so, how lawmakers decide to tackle this problem when they come back. I think we can probably expect the Democrats to dip into their usual bag of tricks for extra legal overreaching with this. I'm not exactly sure how yet, but something tells me that this is going to, we've already seen rumblings of it. I think we're going to see renewed calls for court packing and things of that nature. Pretty much anything that Democrats can do from the halls of Congress to control or otherwise nullify the will of the states and state lawmakers. And then for Republicans, I think, it sounds cheesy to say, but I really do think the main trend we've seen in this Congress from the Republican Party is they are laser focused on getting President Trump's agenda locked into law and passing laws like the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. So I think the question now becomes, what are the subsequent priorities? What are things that were passed in the Big Beautiful Bill that we can strengthen? What are things that got left out of the Big Beautiful Bill that they can maybe reintroduce? Or, what are things that have happened in the interim that could be big? One thing is, Senator Mike Lee and some other members of both houses of Congress have been pushing to repeal the D.C. Home Rule Act of 1974 for a really long time. Now that the president has gone and federalized the National Guard and brought federal troops into the nation's capital, I think we might see a renewed push for Congress to take that last step and say, we are returning control of the nation's capital to Congress and taking it away from these elected officials in D.C.
Oh, that'd be amazing. I like that. I like these predictions. I'm telling you, Tim. So this is the chance where you get to plug anything and everything for your incredible group. Tell us where everyone can go for the Daily Wire and to follow you, and what you guys are looking forward to covering.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, you can find all of our stuff, everything you need to know, at dailywire.com. That's everything from our investigative reporting and breaking news coverage to the hosts that everyone loves, like Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, our Morning Wire podcast, which is a great alternative to the NPR and New York Times This Morning podcast. You can follow me on X at TimeRice1. You can follow my colleagues also on X. They probably have more entertaining feeds than us. But yeah, I would encourage everyone to keep an eye. We're in the process of expanding our Washington D.C. bureau.
Yeah,
we're actually
congrats
going
on
to hire congressional correspondents and political reporters. So jobs are posted if any of your listeners want to shoot me a resume. But yeah, I mean, we're looking forward to just covering, we like to say that we're drinking out of a fire hose. So we're covering anything and everything that comes, and, just looking forward to keeping that pace, and especially with a little bit of a closer eye towards things that are going on here in the nation's capital.
Yeah, it's so exciting. You guys do such a spectacular job, and I'm a big fan, so I always promote and feature you guys. And I appreciate you making the time, as busy as you are, to come on the program. I know all of my viewers and listeners absolutely love it. Tim Rice, thank you so much. And we'll continue covering all of this. Look forward to having you on again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, be good. And much more coming up. And in the meantime, be sure to check out the 1775 Coffee Company. We talk about it all the time. Don't compromise on taste, quality, or your values. And 1775 Coffee is brewed to perfection, crafted with precision, and built on patriotism. The farm to cup process means there's quality, there's authenticity, and sustainability from start to finish. All the beans are ethically and exclusively single sourced. So why not try 1775 Coffee today? Go to 1775coffee.com/KG and you can receive, my friend, 15% off your first order. Why not? Now President Trump is delivering on his promises to secure the southern border, deport violent criminals, and dismantle narco-terrorist cartels. Just look at this latest ICE operation up in Connecticut. Take a look.
Federal deportation operations around Connecticut this past weekend were confirmed today by the federal government. Immigration officials say they arrested 65 people in a 4-day sweep. Nearly 30 reportedly have serious criminal records, we're told. News 8 political reporter Mike Cerulli in Danbury, where ICE was particularly active during this operation. Mike.
Good evening to you, Darren. Here at the scene right now of a protest, protesting what the feds called Operation Broken Trust. That name, Broken Trust, invokes the name of the Connecticut state law, the Trust Act, which limits cooperation between local and state cops and ICE. And it wasn't just the name of this operation that the feds invoked. They also singled out one Democratic state lawmaker in particular. In cities all across Connecticut, ICE agents and their federal partners went to work conducting Operation Broken Trust. Among those nabbed in the operation, ICE says, was this Danbury man in the country illegally and convicted on drug charges, harassment, carrying a prohibited weapon, cruelty toward a child, and obscene communication. In Stamford, ICE says they apprehended this man, also in the country illegally and once arrested for robbery, assault, and breach of peace.
Well, and as we always say, border security is national security. And joining me now, Executive Director of the American Border Story, Nicole Kipralov. Thank you so much for being on the program. Loving having you back.
Thanks for having me back, Kimberly.
All right. So today is National Fentanyl Awareness Day. We just had major fentanyl legislation signed last month. And my friend Jackie Siegel was there with the president. And I know your group was part of making that happen, which was super important. Where are we in the fight against fentanyl poisoning?
Well, first of all, I did meet Jackie. She is just absolutely wonderful. Her work has been instrumental in fighting against this epidemic. Look, today is a very, very important day, National Fentanyl Prevention Awareness Day. And the reality is that fentanyl is one of the most lethal threats to our country's health. It's the leading cause of death for Americans aged 15 to 48. And this is absolutely an open borders issue. It was fueled by the Biden administration because Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Mayorkas, they decided to open our borders and allow for this free flow of fentanyl into our countries. And these cartels specifically that were armed with Chinese precursor chemicals, they pushed millions of lethal doses of fentanyl into our communities, into every community in this country. And look, vulnerable communities, the ones that Democrats always say they care about, they were hit the hardest. In 2021 alone, we had over 110,000 overdose deaths. Terrible. And most of them were tied to fentanyl. And then by 2022, that number climbed to 112,000, which is the highest in U.S. history. And by the way, this wasn't just a southern border issue. There was a close to 600% increase in drug smuggling at the northern border, too, under Biden. And that included a 26% rise in fentanyl. So this is the disaster that President Trump inherited when he got into office in January. But, unlike Biden, he got to work. President Trump got to work immediately to deliver justice for these fentanyl families, these angel families. We work very closely with them at the American Border Story to try and provide as many tools and resources as possible for them to get closer to justice. We can't bring their loved ones back. Unfortunately, nothing can. But what we can do is ensure that this never happens again. And I know the Trump administration is absolutely committed to that.
No, you're right about that. And, the stories of, suffering under drug trafficking, they're painful. They're awful. How can we best translate, that suffering and that sadness that so many families, like our good friend Jackie Siegel, have gone through, into action to building a better future and saving lives? That is a horrific number and statistic about the leading cause of death. 15 to 48, something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just really tragic.
It really is. And that's a really great question, Kimberly, that you're asking. And I think there's so many answers to that. First of all, we can tell these victim stories in a raw and real way. The mainstream media has ignored these stories, or it has skewed these stories, which is just absolutely disgusting. So we can fight against these false media narratives and come out with these victims and their stories of devastation and heartache, because you know what? They're relatable. This can happen to anyone. And that's the message that we want to send. We can also do legislative activism. There's so many ways that every single American can get involved. You talked about President Trump signing the Halt Fentanyl Act. That was an all hands on deck approach. There were so many people who were a part of that. And, for the first time with that very critical legislation, all fentanyl related substances are now permanently classified as Schedule I drugs. That triggers a mandatory 10-year minimum sentence for traffickers in possession of 100 grams or more. So this is very important in terms of deterrence. And this legislation also eliminates loopholes that traffickers exploited for years under the Biden administration. And it gives law enforcement a permanent tool to prosecute them. Again, this is all hands on deck. We need, state and local leadership to be involved in this too. We need the Angel families who are doing such tremendous activism in the midst of their grief. We need them to be involved, and we need every single American to be involved as well. There are many ways to help this effort.
Well, and President Trump is also sending strong signals to cartels in Latin America that he will do whatever it takes to destroy these narco-terrorist crime syndicates. For example, Florida Senator Ashley Moody and DEA head Terry Cole today laid out just what's at stake, just how important is this mission at this exact moment in time.
It's so critical. It's such a critical mission. I think what Senator Moody's doing is, so incredibly important here, and we need more people like her. President Trump, he started working on this issue from day one. He issued that executive order designating the drug cartels, the Sinaloa cartel, Tren de Aragua, as foreign terrorist organizations, and that has now allowed for the administration to use, broader legal, financial tools to target them. He imposed the aggressive fentanyl-linked tariffs. That's also very important. Imports from Mexico and Canada, and putting pressure on China as well to halt fentanyl. We know CIA surveillance operations are also ramping up under the Trump administration. They're using drones in Mexico to track cartel activity. And like Senator Moody said, President Trump sent Navy warships to Venezuela to target the narco trade there. He's leveraging the military very effectively to destroy these cartels.
Yes, he is.
And he's leveraging every tool in his toolbox to keep the American people safe.
Yeah, thanks be to God. It's really true. This is your chance, Nicole. We love you. We love the smart, strong, interesting work that you do, the passion you put into it. Where can people follow you, learn more, and, get involved?
Well, thanks again for helping us spread this very important message. You can visit us at theamericanborderstory.com, our YouTube channel, The American Border Story, or on X, Tabs Report, Instagram, it's at The American Border Story. And please email us. If you have a story to tell, you need resources, a platform, anything, email us at info@americanborderstory.org. We read every single email. We reply to everything. We want people to come to us so that we can help them. So thank you for giving us a platform.
Hey, well, you guys have an excellent reputation for doing just that. And you're very hands-on. And like you say, all hands on deck because lives matter. And the president's doing everything he can to combat all this illegal crime, the cartels, fentanyl that have, stolen so many beautiful lives. Thank you again for the work that you do, my friend.
Thank you, Kimberly. You too. God bless you.
God bless you. And we're going to continue covering all of her great work on this important issue. And in closing, President Trump is doing what he said he was going to do, securing the border, reducing crime, and protecting we, the American people. It is truly a new day in Washington, D.C., and across the country, as we now have a leader standing in your corner and working harder than ever. I want to thank you so much for joining us today and spending time. Please be sure to download the Rumble app, subscribe to my channel, turn on notifications, like and share, and tell all your friends so they know exactly where to find us. And please also be sure to follow me across all platforms: X, Truth Social, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Stay tuned to Rumble for all the very latest breaking news coverage. It was a big one today. And don't miss Don Jr.'s big show, 6 p.m. Eastern tonight. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I'm looking forward to talking to you again very soon. God bless.